He's director of the Deaf Apostolate out of the Archdiocese of Boston. That's at his ordination, actually. We know Father Sean. He's been here a couple times. Oh my gosh, what a great guy. Oh my gosh, just awesome. But the Holy Order requirements are the same. Spiritual, physical, human, moral, intellectual, emotional, and psychological qualities and abilities. It's no different. So someone in a wheelchair oftentimes perishes until the pastor gets in a wheelchair. Oftentimes parishes may not make a lot of accommodations, but you're certainly not going to tell the pastor he can't say Mass anymore. Right? I mean, good grief. So it really is just about being able to be used by God in that ordained ministry. Jeff, tell the story. You were just in Virginia.
So, yeah, so I was just in Virginia. We're godparents for my wife's nephew, and they have a deaf priest.
Blind
priest. Excuse me, a blind priest, sorry. And Carol had asked me, so how does he give communion? And I said, you know, I really don't remember. It must have been something that wasn't, you know, shocking or everybody would notice. And that's what surprised me about it.
Mm-hmm.
So he's completely deaf, white cane, but he's learned his parish and how to work around it. And I didn't even notice any issue with communion, just like any other priest.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. You'll know Father Eleazar Silva here in our diocese. When the Roman Missal, new edition, came out, we as a commission approached him and said, you know, you can get that in large print. So the Xavier Society and the National Xavier Society for the Blind will braille and put on tape almost any church document. And then the National Catholic Partnership on Disability, we actually paid people to go through literally the electronic version from NCCL and the National Catholic English Language thing, and made them in large print, but in a beautiful format, just like a Roman Missal is, right? And then they can just print the pages they need each week, or each Mass. So it's available. So Father Eleazar uses a larger print version, and his secretary prints it out for him every week. No big deal. The one thing I would say is this priest, he's obviously has been in the news, and he had a health condition that put him in a wheelchair, and he talked about how hard it was for his parish, and it had to do, he struggled with the height of the altar, right, from a wheelchair. But then his parish was like, can we figure this out? And they took up a collection and replaced the altar. And you can know that can be thousands of dollars, right? They replaced the altar in his church because they said we need to be sure it can reach it. One of the interesting things is the bishops also say that there should be more awareness and experience for priesthood formation in the seminaries as well. When we did this open workshop last week, Father John Evans came. It was great to have him there. And he said that he is in charge. I didn't know this. I learned something all the time. So the priests who are like the first year after they're ordained, he does, I guess, formation with them. And he made a commitment to include the guidelines in what he's doing with them, which really, that's great. So, holy matrimony. Couples with intellectual or developmental disabilities who believe they are called to the vocation of married life are encouraged to seek counsel by discussing the sacrament with their families and pastors. Does that sound familiar? You still go talk to somebody before you get married, right? That's no different. For matrimonial consent to be valid, it is necessary that it possess sufficient use of reason. But it's also necessary that they understand that marriage is a permanent union and is ordered to the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of children. I want to tell you a story of a young couple, when they're not so young anymore. 27 years ago, two individuals with Down syndrome in the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. got married. They're still married. They entered it with full knowledge that this is a permanent union. They loved each other, and yeah, they're married. They don't have any children at this point that I know of. At this point, they're probably in their 40s, but yeah, I don't think they have any children, but yeah, they're married. Physical disability in and of itself doesn't constitute an impediment to marriage. One of the things, this idea of procreation and education of children, of course, is a piece. But if there's doubt about impotence, the doubt, marriage should not be impeded. So despite being, I grew up saying, oh yeah, you gotta have kids. Woo-hoo, yeah. The reality is just because someone is impotent going into a marriage, it doesn't mean that the marriage should not occur. That kind of makes sense, obviously. If they're going to go to all the trouble and the preparation for marriage, that shouldn't be the impediment to marriage. Because it's more than just the children, obviously. They actually address people who are deaf being married in the language of their choice. They also address the idea of if someone uses a tablet, you can get married using a tablet. You can make your vows using a tablet. It should be in the language and the communication that you use. I'm kind of going through these because I realize I'm up against time, I'm sorry. But whatever communication you use, that's how your matrimonial consent should be made. I have yet to see a marriage on a tablet. I really want to see that. I've definitely seen marriages with interpreters, and I've definitely seen marriages with deaf priests. I've seen all that. I just have never seen it with a tablet. I really want to see that. That would be so cool. Okay, here we go. Remember the end of life thing, right? So sacraments are moments of grace. And especially in matrimony, that grace is not a one-time thing, right? It's the whole life of that matrimony, that marriage. And we live longer. We experience loss of mental or physical capabilities. And the church challenges us, just like they did with those infants who were born, right? You stay there and provide that spiritual support to that family. The faith community must minister to both the spouse whose body or mind begins to fail and also to the spouse who becomes the caregiver. I was talking to Jeff and I was saying, we're really good at our bereavement committees. We really are. Every parish has one. Do we have one for this? Are we supporting couples when they reach this point in their lives? And that's what the bishops are saying, is look guys, matrimony is a lifetime sacrament. We need to be there as pastors, as ministers, as whoever, through that lifetime sacrament. I think it's beautiful. I think it's great. Because we can probably all name someone who's in that situation as an individual or as a caregiver. And what are we in our parishes doing to support them? In summary, I think this quote is great, straight from the guidelines. The church owes persons with disabilities her best efforts in order to ensure that they are able to hear the gospel of Christ, receive the sacraments, and grow in their faith in the fullest and richest manner possible. In summary, if I have to summarize it, it's a lot. All Catholics are fully welcome to participate in the sacramental life of the church. Time, information, the three caveats. It's the right time, they've been properly formed, and they're not prohibited by law. When in doubt, trust the Spirit and confer the sacrament. That doesn't mean the child walks in on Saturday before First Holy Communion and you just give them communion the next day, right? It means we've properly formed. We have to take the time for that formation, so that means we need to find ways to make that work. How that spirit can move with that child or that adult. Engaging in conversations of how to do that. Ask people with disabilities. Ask the mom. If you have a child that is autism and has low communication skills, but still has some capability of learning, my first question would be, well, what do they do at school? How do they learn at school? Because can we try that at church? So there are ways. Families usually know how their kids learn. And then be open and be welcoming. In 2016, Pope Francis said, we all have this ability to grow, to go forward, to love God, to good things, to understand doctrine. We all have the same capacity to receive the sacraments. He continued, each one of us has a different way of understanding everything, but each of us has the ability to know God in a different way. You and I know God a little differently, right? It's just different. In 2016, those quotes were from a healthcare, it's not a pastoral, what does he call it when they had to get together? Sorry, I just forgot. Like a synod or something like that. Anyway, this was from the healthcare one. And after this occurred, Pope Francis became aware, either through his own participation in that healthcare conference or from others, that people with disabilities were still not well represented. And so he called for, here we go, pontifical council is the right word. He actually called a pontifical council last year on the catechesis of people with disabilities, very specifically. And about 300 people from around the world went. Father Sean was there, Father Mike Depsick was there, another deaf priest from the United States. Several of our board members from the National Catholic Partnership on Disabilities went. And this is what Pope Francis said. No physical or mental limitation should ever be an impediment to this encounter, because Christ's face shines in the hearts of each person. Let us learn to overcome the discomfort and fear that at times we feel toward persons with disabilities. Let us learn to seek and also intelligently invent appropriate tools so that no one lacks the support of grace. Let us form by example catechesis ever more able to accompany these persons so that they may grow, there's a lot of typos in there, sorry, grow in faith and give their genuine and original contribution to the life of the church. I actually have a copy of his pontifical address that I think you will find most interesting. There's a gentleman who's a theologian, and I'm not going to remember which church seminary he's at, but anyway, he was there and he took this document and he started comparing it to other church documents, and he'd highlight, this is, and he'd make a note in the margin, it's from this document, or take a note, it's from this document. And he held it up at our board meeting, and the entire page was virtually yellow. The words that Pope Francis uses are not new. They are in our faith, they are in our church documents. I think that's amazing, because for me it's like, I don't exactly read all the church documents, okay, but it was nice to have a theologian tell me that. One of the things I think he specifically addresses, which is really good, Sunday liturgy especially must be able to include them so that the encounter with the risen Lord and with the community itself may be a source of hope and courage in the difficult journey of life. So what are your thoughts? You probably have examples of how this has worked well in your parish, or challenges.
I was given this presentation at a conference, especially about the revised guidelines, and I was just blown away that so many people weren't getting them. And I came back to Carolyn and I said, "This isn't happening in our diocese." She said, "Oh, yes, it is." Mm-hmm. She said it does, and it's not so much that it has to not wanting to, it's the not understanding about how.
Right.
And so I think one of the things that we can do as lay and as deacons, because you're so much of that bridge, they might not go, Father, they might come to you and say, they might even not even go to the DRE, they might come to you first and say, "I've got this child, he's 12, and he needs to make his first communion." So I think that's one of the really great things about the commission, the disabilities, is that they can help you. They can help your DRE with these resources.
Yep. And we have a lending library. I think I have it on the next page. We have a lending library of materials. I don't like to stand up and promote a single publisher, but Loyola Press has done a fabulous job of making some adaptive materials for sacramental preparation. Sadlier, you probably recognize as a huge publisher for religious education, has done some excellent things in their teachers' editions by offering lots of strategies to the catechists. So there are resources out there. The commission, like I said, we have a lending library of things. We'll also respond to calls like this particular mother that's reaching out to me right now. That's what we're here for, is to help you and help our whole diocese be fully accessible. You know, whether it's helping a deacon, or whether it's helping a parent, or whether it's helping a DRE or a catechist. We'll try to do our best to help, and if we don't know, then we'll find out. None of us have a corner on the market of how to do everything. So, any other thoughts or questions, or was this like totally new, or did you get the idea? Yeah, kind of get the sense here.
All my questions were answered very quickly.
Oh, okay.
But I would echo what Ruth said. Some of it reinforces what we're doing.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Number one, it gives us a resource to go to on specific instances. And number two, to not just sympathize or empathize, but look at them more on the same level, albeit in some cases one-on-one. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Something I would add is disabilities are a minority group, but it's a minority group we can all become members of.
Half of us are disabled.
That's right. I got glasses, I got hearing aids. I could be in a car accident on my way home and have a traumatic brain injury. There's so many things it's not. So, did you have something to add?
I just want to, when I go back, I need to check on our hosts and that for
Oh, okay.
gluten-free, because at St. Lawrence, we actually kept a whole container of gluten-free hosts in this tabernacle, because we have a couple people that are celiac, and they don't always come to the same mass or
Right,
whatever,
yeah.
so we're not ready for them unless they come up for communion and that, but I gotta check about, because where it says that they don't last that long, and you
Yeah,
need to keep
they
them in the
do.
freezer.
You gotta keep them in the freezer.
Yeah, I have stashes in my freezer and I always take them to parishes too.
And I couldn't tell you how many, but we have a number of parishioners that just before Mass, they'll bring it up to the MC and
Yeah.
put it on the altar. That way
Yeah.
it comes from-
It's really funny because as someone who knows that I'm going to disrupt how Father prepares for Mass, and every one of them prepare differently, right? When we had Father David St. Thomas More, he didn't even want to do confessions at 4 o'clock on Saturday night. It's like he really wanted to be focused on being prepared for Mass. I respect that. I never show up less than a half hour early. Never. Because I know that I'm going to challenge, if it's not something they do every day, I know that I am taking them out of their normal thought process in preparation for Mass, and I need to respect that. So I tend to show up early. Everybody doesn't do that. But, yeah. Dwayne?
Yes, I just want to take a moment and thank you, as like you say, in the commission for all you do. And like I said, I've had an opportunity to go with Carol up to Ogden. And so we were St. Joseph. So my wife and I, part of our ministry now is to do the presentations for this in Spanish.
Yeah.
So that's what, like I say, what my wife Carla and I were able to do. But just I wanted to share sort of one experience that I had and sort of just put it into context. So my wife and Carol worked together for many years. They were on the governor's council for people with disabilities. So they've known each other. You guys did work with Carlos and Marriott. My wife was over the HR for Marriott, and so they did stuff together there. And it seems like all along we run into each other, right? About a year ago, and Carol was signing at up at the Newman Center at the funeral for a good friend of ours, Arthur Valdez. And so we always seem to never be too far from each other, right? And then you and Carla started talking.
The spirit works funny that way.
So you and Carla got back together. She says, hey, Carol wants to come and talk to us over at our parish at St. Andrew. So it's been, what, a couple months ago, you came out, after the Sunday Mass, we met for a while and said, yeah, we'd like to definitely help with doing these. So that was on a Sunday. The next day, my wife and I were up at Judge. My son had an activity up at Judge Memorial, so we were up there, and my wife got a phone call. And it was a family who, we were friends with, but just over time and sort of life busyness, we sort of, hadn't been in contact much. But it was her friend, and then the mom was on the phone saying, hey, her husband was in, they had told him they had about a week and he was going to pass away. And she said, we don't know what to do, how do we get things arranged at the mortuary, all those type of things. So Carla passed me the phone and said, hey, they want to talk to you since you're a deacon. So I said, okay.
Isn't that how it goes?
So I get on there. So I get on the phone with her, and she's just, devastated. I've never planned anything. Here's what we have. We're just going to do stuff at the mortuary. She said, my husband, was not Catholic. So she was Catholic. He wasn't. They had been married for years and years. He had been going with her over to St. Joseph's for like the last 25 years. Never been baptized. And so, we were just talking, and she says, hey, I know I can't have a Catholic Mass, those type of things. And I said, you know what, let's do this. I mean, I can help you, like say, even if it's just from a friend helping you officiate or whatever you do there, we can do there at the services. So then I said, we'll be in contact, let me follow up with you tomorrow. So I hung up the phone, and my wife's like, we're talking about how, he said he always believed in the Catholic Church, was never baptized. And so then as we hung up, like say my wife and I were talking, and she's like, well, I mean, here's an I mean, does he want to be baptized? I mean, we're looking at, he's never, you know, but this is something he's wanted to do his whole life. So then I get back on the phone, and I call her back, and I say, hey, you know, here's what we're thinking. I say, you keep mentioning that, you know, his love is, I mean, he believed in the Catholic Church, but he was LDS. But his faith to proclaim was, you know, he believed in the Catholic Church. And I said, let me make a couple of phone calls. So I called our Father Marco, our priest, and like I say, they were over at St. You know, they were over at St. Joseph. So then I got on the phone with Father Javier, and so we were just talking about, you know, sort of what was going on. So they were under the impression they had a week or so before he passed away. So then the next Tuesday evening, I was doing a celebration there of the Word at our parish, and they called and said he's in really, really bad shape. He's turned, you know, a really bad turn. So I called Father Javier again, and because he had told, we'd spoken during the day, and he said he was going to go that evening because he wanted to be baptized, as far as, you know, the gentleman who was passing away. So then Father Javier says, you know what, I had this issue come out the parish that I know I'm not going to be able to, and he says, if you want to, I said, I can go baptize him. So I called the family and says, hey, here, you know, I can be there. I said, I got to run and take care of this thing real quick for my son, but I'll be there. We got there about 10 o'clock, my wife and I, about 10 o'clock. And when I had done that celebration of the Word, you know, I shared this sort of part of my little reflection piece about, you know, how we're there to serve. So our parish, when after that, you know, service was over, one of the parishioners said, I want you to take this rosary and present it to the family and tell her that the St. Andrew community is praying for them all. So then we, you know, so we got there about 10 at night, and the whole family was there. And it was, I said, maybe like I say, I tell my wife, to what we saw with the family and sort of the dignity until the final moments with, you know, with their dad. So, you know, I was able to baptize him. And he was getting to the point where he could barely express, but I mean, it was with his eyes, it was his touching of the hands. And so, like I say, you know, I was able to baptize him, and there was just, when we did it, he was, you know, you could just feel it, the room, you could just feel peace, you could feel the Spirit there, and he just had this tear in his eye that I just couldn't forget. So, like I say, we stayed there until about 11 that night. The next morning, they called me at work about 11 in the morning, saying he had just passed away. And so he passed away basically what he had always wanted, to be Catholic. But what was so interesting, I could tell Carol, as we spoke with the family, is he had had cancer, and about 2 years ago, he had lost his sight. And so the biggest thing, he always wanted to go through the RCIA program, but he was embarrassed because he felt, I'm blind, my wife's going to be there, it's going to be a distraction to everybody, you know, there in the RCIA class. If there's a delay, she has to help me through. So he never ever, you know, he never did. And so it was just a perfect example of what, you know, the commission is sharing with us all, of how many, you know, how many opportunities, or sometimes we don't even know. It's right, like say, it's right in front of us, but we just don't even really know that that stuff's going on. And so we presented that night the rosary from our parish to her, and I mean, she just, like say, she just lost it. And so then that was like on a Wednesday, so that Sunday night, I was able to do the rosary for their family, and he just looked so at peace. And she had just shared with me that day, she says when he passed away, he was down to like, he could just sort of like make like groaning noises or he'd make, and she just said, we did it. They always just call him Daddy, you know, they said, we did it, Daddy, you became Catholic. And he said, yep, was like one of his final words. And then he passed away, and he also had that little tear that we'd seen at the night we baptized him. But when we did the rosary service for him, the family members, and like I say, most of his family were non-Catholic, but they came to the, you know, there to the funeral home, and they were looking at him, and they were like, what has happened? His face, his color had returned. He was at peace. And the rosary that we had presented from our parish, they had it with him, they buried it with him, but it was right there, like I say, you know, in his hands, and as they would come through, they couldn't believe, you know, what difference, because they had been there those last days before he passed away. And so, like I could tell Carol, I mean, that Spirit, you know, is there calling us. And it was the day after that we first met with Carol, and that we had that situation. And as far as he had always wanted to go through RCIA, but he just never did, and when he finally lost his sight, he just sort of given up that
Given
hope.
up the
So
hope, yeah. So Dwayne and Carla have been fabulous. The workshops we're offering are bilingual workshops. And in fact, the comments after the St. Joseph, one in St. Joseph in Ogden was, thank you for having one workshop, not two. People really appreciated having a joint workshop. So just so you know, the next ones are, if any of your catechists, GREs, anyone you would like to attend, is May 5th is in Cedar City at Christ the King. May 12th is at St. Francis of Assisi in Orem. And then our next one is scheduled in Roosevelt in September. But we're more than happy to come talk to anyone, anytime, and do this. So
I was just going to add, we're going to be doing this for the RCIA study days.
Yes,
Carol will
right.
be presenting in June to our RCIA team. And then it was brought up at the last meeting in Ogden with the deacons. This is great, we're hearing it with the priest sitting here.
The priest is
And so, Deacon George is taking that back to the bishop, and we're going to try really hard to get it on the convocation this fall or next spring, so that everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely. I think our bishops have given us a beautiful message of body of Christ. That's what they've given us, and they're just challenging us to be sure that that's what we're doing. So,
Thank you, Carol.
thank